True or false, Canvas can use a quiz bank to automatically populate the questions on your quizzes. The answer to that question and more on another episode of This Week in Canvas. Welcome back to another episode of This Week in Canvas. I'm Pat Cranley, and today we're going to be exploring how we can create and manage quiz banks inside of Canvas. The hard work of manually creating a quiz is taken out of the equation when using a quiz bank. The toolset in Canvas allows us to automatically populate our quiz with questions from a pool or bank. This method of creating quizzes creates an assessment tool that's flexible, customizable, and whose questions are randomly selected. Let me show you how to build a quiz bank in Canvas.
So I'm over here in my quizzes item in my default Canvas shell, and I want to draw your attention to the upper right hand corner where we have this button with the three little dots on it. Inside this button has an option that allows us to manage the question banks. Now, question banks are fantastic because they allow us to create a whole series of questions that now then get fed into specific quizzes. So the quizzes are not the owner of the questions. The banks are. Now, what this allows us to do is incorporate the questions from multiple banks into one quiz. Let's start off by adding a question bank into our default Canvas shell. I'm going to call this one History of Animation. I teach an animation class. And once we create the title of it and click on the link, we'll be able to go in and start adding some questions. So the first question that I want to ask is going to be about the classic film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and specifically was, what year was Snow White released? And I know, because I'm a history nerd and I love my animation, the correct answer is 1937. And I'll just give them a couple. 2001, how about 1940, and then finally, let's do 1966. There we go. We'll update the question. Now, so I have a question bank, and inside is a specific question. Now, I want to load this question and then all of its friends into a quiz. So let's go back over into the quizzes section now and physically create a new quiz, then access the questions inside of that bank. And this is going to be the History of Animation quiz. There we go. The instructions will be, please answer the following questions. Now, under the questions section, this really is the most important part because this is the area where we start to feed in the questions from our question bank into this quiz. So how we do it is we go down here to New Question Group. Now, right down here at the bottom, check it out. It says Link to Question Bank, and this is what we're after. Now, since we've already created a question bank previously in this little video, it's showing up here in the list. So if I select it and then choose Select Bank, now all of that information is going to be funneled into this group. So let's just call this the History Group. Now, if I had multiple questions inside of my bank, I can tell it how many questions to randomly pull from that bank and what points we should assign to each one of the questions. Let's create group. Then we're going to go back to the Save button, and let's see if it all works by previewing our quiz. And there it is. What year was Snow White? So it's successfully pulling all of that question information from our question bank. Now, the power of this really starts to come into play when we're working with multiple question banks, and that's what I'd like to show you next. So I've gone ahead and continued to flush out all of my question banks, and I've added a whole series of questions into the system. So now I've added 3 more question banks, one of the animation production pipeline, some extra credit questions. I've added a whole bunch more questions to my history section, and then finally I have a whole series of questions about the principles of animation. And if you look carefully here, you can see a whole series of details. There's 10 questions in this bank, 12 in here. I have 4 extra credit questions, and then some 5 production pipeline questions. And in the context of maybe like a midterm or a final exam, really what I want to do is that I want to pull 5 questions from this group, randomly pull 5 questions from that group, maybe 1 extra credit, and then I want all 5 of the animation production pipeline. Let's go back to my quizzes section and start working on this. So here's my History of Animation quiz, and instead of making a new one, I'm just going to edit what's already here. And then once again, if we go into the edit phase and then into our questions section, Let's do it. So now let's do new question group, same thing as before. So the first one is going to be the history group. And I want to link to the history bank. But this time, let's select the bank. This time I want 5 questions out of that bank, and each question is going to be 1 point. So we'll create that group. Now let's add a new question group. This is going to be the principles group. And I'm going to link this group to the principles of animation group, or question bank, excuse me. And I also want 5 questions out of there. Of course, we can't forget our production group. And we're going to link to the animation production pipeline group. I want all 5 questions out of here. So I want 5 out of there. I'll create that one. And then lastly, I want an extra credit group. I want 1 question out of my extra credit bank. So it's going to randomly pick what question goes in here, and each student is going to get a different question out of the bank, which is pretty neat. And that's the cool thing about the randomization. So just pick 1 question, it's going to be 1 point extra credit, and we'll get there. So almost when you're doing it like this, every single student is going to get a different quiz. They're going to be different questions. Now, you as the instructor gets to choose the importance of those questions and the purpose behind all of them. Let's hit save. One of the things that I also like to do, let's preview it real fast. Just do a kind of a spot check to really ensure that we're getting some randomization. Yeah, so here it is. First feature film. This is the more history questions in here. So these are all the history questions. There we go. And now on question number 6, so it's working perfectly. Question number 6, now we're talking about the principles. If you remember earlier, the first group was the history. So questions 1 through 5 come from the history bank. 6 through 10 are going to be from the principles bank. And then, of course, down here at the bottom, the last one is my extra credit question. And for those of you that are paying attention, Star Wars is my most favorite film franchise out there, which is pretty fun. So let me go back here for a second. We're going to be done with this quiz. We don't want to preview it anymore. Everything is working quite wonderfully. The last little bit that I like to do when I'm creating my quizzes to really make it random and to really make it unique is in the edit properties. Check it out. We can also shuffle the answers. So not only are we grabbing random questions from the quiz banks, we're also assigning the correct answer field for each one of those questions into a different slot inside of the quiz itself. So now we're making it truly unique. Everyone is ultimately getting a different set of questions in the answers to those questions are in a different set of orders, which makes it a whole lot of fun.
Using quiz banks creates an assessment tool that helps our students understand their mastery of the topic while maintaining the integrity of the quiz. That wraps up another episode of This Week in Canvas. Please reach out to the distance education team by shooting us an email or by calling the CRC Campus Helpline. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.